I was listening to this program this week. It talked about aging gracefully, about this lessons of the Okinawa centurion study. They studied people that are 100 years old or more, and they found out some things that help them to live a lot longer. You probably don't want to hear about what they recommend that we should eat, but it was interesting. Another thing that they talked about that was also interesting was the positive effect that support gives someone in living a long and healthy life. They said the support of family and friends has tremendous benefits for health. I think this speaks very well for congregational life, especially in our time. We live in a time that is increasingly private and individualistic. Not only that, families are spread out. I know in my family, I live in Minnesota, we have family in Wisconsin, New York, Florida, and we're not alone. Very few families are still living in the same small town. We thought that it was bad enough in the Industrial Revolution and the effects that it had on farming. I have often heard stories of yesteryear, how they all came together to plant and how they all came together to harvest, and they used to fix meals and eat meals together. They worked hard together, but they knew their neighbors, and they worked and they cared for each other. Even when they didn't even like each other, they still cared for each other. Even in my childhood, I remember after church, we would go and visit families, our family or people from church or something, and we didn't even call ahead. We just showed up. And you didn't have to call ahead and show up. You just stopped in. Nowadays, we apologize for stopping in without an appointment. I even remember my brother and sister-in-law getting mad at my parents for stopping by. Well, it's my brother. We can't turn the clock back, I know that. But remember when we were complaining that we couldn't get people away from their television sets? And now we have social media. People just don't get together anymore. But we do at church. The church can play a vital role in this very important social support. But then again, if people are going to get together and support one another, how are they going to get along? Well, maybe God knew something about this, and that's why he gave us the 10 Commandments. God's basic rule of life is love God, love your neighbor. Not just your next door neighbor, not just your bestie, your best friend, but all people. How are we going to do that? Well, first I want to play one of my favorite 10 Commandment movie clips for you. Bill, would you play that?
Moses went to the mountain, and God spoke unto him.
Moses, this is the Lord thy God, commanding you to obey my law. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. A deaf man could hear you.
What?
Nothing, Ganesh, forget it. Oh, Lord, why have you chosen me? What would you have me do for you?
I shall give you my laws, and you shall take them unto the people.
Yes, Lord! Lord, I shall give these laws unto thy people. Hear me! Oh, hear me! All pay heed! The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 15, 10 commandments for all to obey.
Wonder what were in those other commandments. So we have the 10 commandments. Now here's a question for you. And we already spilled the beans here. What do you think is the commandment that is broken most often? That's what I think. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or your resident alien in your towns, so that your male and female slave may have rest as well as you. Remember, you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. That's interesting, outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Now, isn't it strange? Who would ever think that if your boss told you to take a day off, you would say, no, I'd rather work? Actually, we say, I can't. Or we take the rest day and we fill it up with stuff, even if it's play, in the name of play. When I served in a rural parish, we'd have people that would work, say, a factory job during the week, and then on the weekend they'd work their hobby farm. So they're working all the time. Or they had some other kind of job. Sure, it's a change of pace. Sure, it may be something that they enjoy. But is it really rest? I'm not saying we shouldn't do recreational things. Of course we should. But when do we rest? When was the last time that you came back from a vacation and you weren't exhausted? Think of it this way. Let's say I had a heart attack and I survived, which is good news because if you survive one heart attack, you can survive many others, right? Well, I think that's good news. So I'm lying in bed, I had a heart attack, and the doctor comes in and he says, you need to get some rest before we send you home. So what do you think? Round of golf? Mow the lawn? Drive the kids around to ball games all weekend? You think the doctor would go for that? Is that good rest? Work in the garden? What does a body need? Now, don't get me wrong. I know how our culture works. Pardon the pun. I have to tell you, true confessions, that on Saturday afternoon, before Saturday worship, I take a nap. I do it because I need it, and I do it because I want to be fresh for the Saturday night service. But you know, I often feel guilty about it because I feel lazy for taking a nap. Wasted part of the day. But here's another thing to think about. Have you ever heard a mother or father say of a screaming child, a screaming, misbehaving child, I think he's tired. I think she's exhausted. And that is apparently why the child is crying, screaming, banging her head on the floor, hitting other kids. And I think the mom and dad are right when they say that. When we feel good, when we feel rested, we can show patience. We have consideration for others. When we are tired, when we are not feeling good, when we're not feeling good, we are not at our best. We do not act our best. We need our rest for our good and for our body's good, our mind, our spirit, and the good of everyone around us. So here is permission from God. You can take a nap. You can rest your body. It's okay. I know it's countercultural. I know people might think you're lazy, but I won't tell anybody. Now, when we talk about Sabbath, I'm not even going to mention remembering the Sabbath and going to weekly worship and reconnecting with God, because you're here. You're doing it, right? And I know that you're probably even going to take that summer Bible reading challenge and read those 20 stories a month. So I'm not going to even talk about that part of the Sabbath. Just get some rest. Encourage people around you to do the same. But there's something else I need to talk to you about, because it was something that Jesus was very concerned about in our lesson today. Remember, I said that God's basic rule is love God and love your neighbor. And that the commandments help us to do that. And that getting along with God and other people is advantageous to our health. Well, as important as the commandments are in helping us get along with God and helping us get along with other people, as important as they are, we shouldn't let the commandments get in the way of the well-being of our neighbor. We shouldn't let the commandments get in the way of the well-being of our neighbor. What am I talking about? There's a saying that I like, people before things. For example, you shall not work on the Sabbath. That's the commandment. And we have established that commandments are good. And that it's good for our bodies, our minds, our souls, our attitude, and our community. But Jesus finds a man who needs to be healed for his own good and for the good of his family and the good of the whole community. So there's multiplying effects on this healing. But it's the Sabbath. You're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. Yet Jesus doesn't let the law, which has the purpose of helping people, get in the way of his helping people. We can't just follow the commandments and the laws blindly. But that's very dangerous, because we know that rules and laws are very important. They're important for our protection and for the order of our community. But if the purpose is for the well-being of people, sometimes we have to make some choices. And those choices are not always very easy. It's very easy to look at Jesus and that situation and healing that man on the Sabbath. And anyway, if it's hard to make that choice, Jesus made that choice, so it must be the right choice. Those are easy ones. There are some easy ones. However, there are difficult ones. But we have to remember that our ultimate calling is love God, love people. Now, there's a lot to think about there. So get some rest and think about it. In Jesus' name, amen.